All right, so chapter 1, The Thief of Always by Clive Barker. Here's what it says on the back of the book. Mr. Hood's holiday house has stood for 1,000 years, welcoming countless children into its embrace. It is a place of miracles where every childhood whim may be satisfied. There is a price to be paid, of course, but young Harvey Swick, bored with his life and beguiled by Mr. Hood's wonders, does not stop to consider the consequences. It is only when the house shows its darker face, when Harvey discovers the pitiful creatures that dwell in its shadows, that he comes to doubt Mr. Hood's philanthropy. But the house and its mysterious architect are not about to release their captive without a battle. Mr. Hood has ambitions for his new guest, for Harvey's soul burns brighter than any he has encountered in 10 centuries. It says, Clive Barker puts the dark side back into childhood fantasy. So Liam, if you're just joining us, we're starting a new book. It's called The Thief of Always, and it's a little scary. If you're worried about a scary book, don't listen. Chapter 1, Harvey, the Half-Devoured. The great gray beast
I'll be in breakout room 4.
had eaten Harvey Swick alive. Here he was, buried in the belly of that smothering month, wondering if he would ever find his way out through the cold coils that lay between here and Easter. He didn't think much of his chances. More than likely, he'd become so bored as the hours crawled by that one day he'd simply forget to breathe. Then maybe people would get to wondering why such a fine young lad had died in his prime. It would become a celebrated mystery. Then and only then would the grim truth be discovered. The detective would first follow Harvey's route to school every morning, trekking through the dismal streets. Then he'd have to sit at Harvey's desk and listen to the pitiful drone of Harvey's teacher and wonder how the heroic boy had managed to keep his eyes open. And finally, as the wasted day dwindled to dusk, he'd trace the homeward trek, and as he set foot on the step from which he had departed that morning, people asked him, as they would, why such a sweet soul as Harvey had died. He would shake his head and say, it's very simple. Oh, the crowd would ask, do tell. And brushing away a tear, the detective would explain, Harvey Swick was eaten by the great gray beast February. So they're talking about the terrible weather in February. It was a monstrous month, that was for sure. A dire and dreary month. Christmas was over, and it was already dimming in Harvey's memory. There would be spring break someday, but what was that, 5-6 weeks away? Math wasn't his strong point, so he didn't irritate himself by trying to figure it out. He simply knew that long before the sun came to save him with summer, he would have withered away in the belly of February. You shouldn't waste time sitting in your room, his mom said when she came in and found him watching the raindrops. I got nothing better to do, Harvey said. Well, then you can make yourself useful, his mother said. Harvey shuddered. Useful? That was another work for hard labor. He sprang up, marshaling his excuses. He hadn't done this, he hadn't done that, but it was too late, his mother said. You can start by tidying up your room, but don't sit here wishing away the days, honey. Life's too short, but that's a good boy. And with that, she left him. Muttering to himself, he stared around his room. It wasn't even untidy. Sure, there were 1 or 2 games scattered around, a couple of drawers open, few clothes on the floor. It looked fine. I am 10, he said to himself. Having no brothers and sisters, he talked to himself a great deal. I mean, it's not like I'm a kid. I don't have to tidy up because she says so. It's so boring. He was just muttering now. He was talking out loud. I want to, what do I want? I don't know what I want, he said. I just know I'll die if I don't have some fun. I'll die. And as he spoke, the window rattled. A gust of wind blew hard against it, then a second, then a third. Even though Harvey didn't remember the window being so much as an inch ajar, it was suddenly thrown open. Cold rain spattered his face. Half closing his eyes, he crossed to the window and fumbled to slam it. The wind had started his lamp moving, and when he turned back, the whole room seemed to be swinging around. One moment the light was blazing, the next it was flooding the opposite wall. But in between, he saw standing in the middle of his room a stranger. He looked harmless enough. He was no more than 6 inches taller than Harvey. His frame scrawny, his skin distinctly yellowish in color. He was wearing a fancy suit, a pair of glasses, and a lavish smile. Who are you? Harvey demanded, wondering how he could get past this interloper to the door. Don't be nervous, the man replied, teasing off one of his suede gloves. My name's Rictus. You are Harvey Swift, aren't you? Yes. I thought for a moment I'd got the wrong house. Harvey couldn't take his eyes off Rictus's grin. It was wide enough to shame a shark with two perfect rows of gleaming teeth. There he is, up close and personal. You've got questions, I can see that, Rictus said to Harvey. Yeah, ask away, I've got nothing to hide. Well, how did you get in, for one thing? Through your window, of course. It's a long way up from the street. Not if you're flying. Flying? Of course. How else was I going to get around on a foul night like this? It was either that or a rowboat. We short folk got to watch out when it's raining this hard. One step wrong and you're swimming. He peered at Harvey. Do you swim? In the summer sometimes, Harvey replied, wanting to get back to the business of flying. But Rictus took the conversation in another direction. On nights like this, he said, doesn't seem like there'll ever be another summer. Sure doesn't, said Harvey. You know, I heard you sighing a mile off, and I thought to myself, there's a kid who needs a vacation. He consulted his watch. If you got time, that is. The time? For a trip, boy. For a trip, you need an adventure, young Swick. Somewhere out of this world. How'd you hear me sighing when you were a mile away? Harvey wanted to know. Why should you care? I heard you. That's all that matters. Is it magic of some kind? Maybe. Why won't you tell me? Rictus gave Harvey a beady stare. I think you're too inquisitive for your own good. That's why, he said, his smile decaying a little. If you don't want help, that's fine by me. He made a move toward the window. The wind was still gusting. Wait, Harvey said. For what? Said Rictus. I'm sorry, I won't ask any more questions. No more questions, eh? I promise, said Harvey. I told you I'm sorry. So you did, so you did. I know a place where the days are always sunny and the nights are full of wonders. Could you take me there? We said no questions, boy. We agreed. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. Being a forgiving sort, I'll forget you spoke. And I'll tell you this. If you want me to inquire on your behalf, I'll see if they've got another room for a guest. I'd like that. I'm not guaranteeing anything, Rictus said, opening the latch. I understand. The wind gusted suddenly and blew the window wide. Watch for me, Rictus yelled above the din of rain and wind. Harvey started to ask if he'd be coming back soon, but stopped himself in the nick of time. No questions, boy, Rictus said. And as he spoke, the wind filled up his coat. It rose around him like a black balloon, and he was suddenly swept over the windowsill. Questions rot the mind, he yelled as he blew away. Keep your mouth shut and find out what comes your way. And with that, the wind carried him off, the balloon of his coat rising like a black moon against the rainy sky. And here's the next chapter, The Hidden Way. And we're going to read that one too. Chapter 2. Harvey said nothing about his peculiar visitor to either his mom or his dad in case they put locks on the windows and stopped Rictus from returning to the house. But the trouble with keeping the secret was that after a few days, Harvey began to wonder if he'd imagined the whole thing. Perhaps he'd fallen asleep and just had a dream. He kept hoping, though, lying on his pillow at night. And then about a week after that first visit, just when he was starting to lose hope, his watchfulness was rewarded. On his way to school one foggy morning, he heard a voice above his head and looked up to see Rictus floating down from the clouds. His coat swelled up around him, and he looked fatter than a prize pig. How you doing? He said as he descended. I was starting to think I'd invented you, Harvey replied. You know, like a dream. I get that a lot, Rictus said, his smile wider than ever. Particularly from the ladies. You're a dream come true, they say, he winked. And who am I to argue? You like my shoes? Harvey looked down at Rictus's bright blue shoes. They were quite a sight, and he said so. I got given them by my boss, Rictus said. He's very happy you're going to come visit. So are you ready? Well, it's no use wasting time, Rictus said. There may not be room for you tomorrow. Can I just ask one question? Oh, I thought we agreed. I know, but just one. All right, one. Is this place far from here? Nah, it's just across town. So I'd be only missing a couple hours of school? That's two questions, said Rictus. No, I'm just thinking out loud, Rictus grunted. Look, he said, I'm not here to do a great song and dance and persuade you. I've got a friend called Jive does that. I'm just a smiler. I smile and I say, come with me to the holiday house. And if folks don't want to come, hey, it's their hard luck. With that, he turned his back on Harvey. Wait, Harvey protested, I want to come, but just for a little while. You can stay as long as you like, Rictus said, or as little. All I want to do is take that glum expression off your face and put one of these up there. His grin grew even larger. Is there any crime in that? No, said Harvey, that's no crime. I'm glad you found me. I really am. So what if he missed all day of school? He thought it'd be no great loss. Maybe an hour or two of the afternoon as well, as long as he was home by 3 or 4, certainly before dark. I'm ready to go, he said. Rictus, lead the way. Millsap, the town in which Harvey had lived all his life, wasn't very big, and he thought he'd seen just about all of it over the years. But the streets he knew were soon far behind him, and though Rictus was setting a fair speed, Harvey made sure he kept a mental list of landmarks so that he could find his way home. A butcher's shop with 2 pigs' heads hanging from hooks, a church with a yard of old tombs beside it, a statue of a general. And while they walked, Rictus kept up a stream of chatter. I hate the fog, just hate it, he said, and there'll be rain by noon. We'll be out of it, of course. He went on from talk of rain to state of the streets. Look at this trash all over the sidewalk. It's shameful. And the mud. It's making a mess of my new shoes. He had plenty more to say, but none of it was very interesting. So after a while, Harvey gave up listening. How far was the holiday house? He began to wonder. The fog was chilling and his legs were aching. I know what you're thinking, said Rictus. I bet you don't. You're thinking this is all a trick. You're thinking Rictus is leading you on a mystery tour and there's nothing at the end. Isn't that true? Maybe a little. Well, my boys, I've got news for you. Look up ahead. He pointed, and there, not very far from where they stood, was a high wall, which was so long that it disappeared into the fog to the left and the right. What do you see? Rictus asked him. A wall, Harvey replied, though the more he stared at it, the less certain of this he was. The stones, which had seemed solid, now looked to be shifting and moving. It looks like a wall, Harvey said, but it's not a wall. You're very observant, Rictus replied. Most people just see a dead end, so they turn around and take another street. But not us? No, not us. We're going to keep on walking. You know why? Because the holiday house is on the other side? What a miraculous kid you are, Rictus replied. That's exactly right. Exactly right. Are you hungry, by the way? Starving. Well, there's a woman waiting for you in the house called Mrs. Griffin. And let me tell you, she's the greatest cook in all of America. I swear, anything you could dream of eating, she'll cook. All you have to do is ask. Let's go. I don't see a gate, Harvey said. That's because there isn't one. So how do we get in? Just keep walking. Half out of hunger, half out of curiosity, Harvey did as Rictus had instructed, and he came within 3 steps of the wall. Suddenly, a gust of balmy, flower-scented wind slipped between the shimmering stones and kissed his cheek. Its warmth was welcome after his long, cold trek, and he picked up his pace, reaching out to touch the wall. But as he reached out, the misty stones seemed to reach for him, wrapping their soft gray arms around his shoulders and ushering him through the wall. He looked back, but the street he'd stepped out of was gone. Beneath his feet, the grass was high and full of flowers. Above his head, the sky was midsummer blue, and ahead of him was a house that had surely been first imagined in a dream. He didn't wait to see if Rictus was coming, nor to wonder about the gray beast February that had been killed and the warm day that had risen in its place. He simply let out a laugh that Rictus would have been proud of and ran up the slope and into the shadow of the dream house. And the next chapter is Pleasure and the Worry. And here's our beautiful, scary picture. So tomorrow we'll read chapter 3.